academic class, like my Zelda writing class I mentioned, children are more invested when it's something they're interested in. And so I've been doing some one-on-one tutoring with a couple of students, and anytime that we have writing assignments, I let them write about games, and I understand the games, and they're more excited about it. It's no longer like you must write 3 pages. It's like, wow, you wrote 10 pages about this? That's amazing. Now that we have this passion that you have kindled here, let's format it in the way that it needs to be formatted.
Explore the dynamic world of homeschooling, online learning, and education with the Homeschool Edu Topics podcast from the Music and Language Learning Center, hosted by Dr. Kristine Dizon. Discover innovative teaching methods, navigate the challenges of online learning, and empower parents and educators to create engaging learning environments for children. Tune in for expert interviews, insightful discussions, and practical tips to enrich your homeschooling journey.
Hello, I'm Dr. Kristine Dizon, founder of the Music and Language Learning Center, and today I'm with Miss Devyn, who is owner of Miss Devyn's Video Game Universe, a 6-figure online teaching business that specializes in using video games to help children learn and gain confidence in themselves. She earned a bachelor's degree in English with an emphasis in writing from Brigham Young University, Idaho. In 2023, she was featured on the Kelly Clarkson Show, where she spoke about how important it is to validate a child's interests and provide a safe space where they can find like-minded peers. That is what Ms. Devyn has done with her organization. The organization's motto is creating safe online spaces where all children can connect with other gaming children. Ms. Devyn's Video Game Universe is an inclusive setting where children can come and be themselves. Ms. Devyn and her teacher specialize in helping other neurodivergent and neurotypical children find a place in the gaming world. She is also a wife and mother of 4, and her family loves to go skiing, play games, ride bikes, and read together. So thank you, Devyn, for joining us today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I know I've talked a lot about, the different things that you have done in your career and how, you were able to create, this really great space for kids, through your organization. Could you tell us a little bit more about what led you there?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started my online teaching, it was actually teaching children in China how to speak English. And I loved it. I loved the online teaching space, but obviously the hours were very difficult because I was teaching, in Chinese Standard Time. And so I found my way over to OutSchool, which is where I'm teaching now. And as I started teaching on OutSchool, I wanted to bring in my background with gaming. I wanted to bring in my background with writing, and I also speak Spanish. And so what I started doing was I started creating these classes for kids where they would learn Spanish, but using Pokemon. So instead of learning things like, the banana is yellow, it was like Pikachu is yellow. And those slowly started to evolve more and more into the Spanish language. And then I started making creative writing courses. I had one about Zelda where we would write a whole, basically additional fan fiction about Zelda. And my students would ask me, like, Ms. Devyn, I'm stuck on this part on the Zelda game. Can you help me? And I was kind of like, well, I don't know. We're writing right now. Maybe, the last day of class we'll have like a gaming day. And it kind of just slowly evolved from there. These children kept asking me, they're like, Miss Devyn, I really need help with this game. I really want to find other kids who game. Do you have any classes like that? And so I started building social clubs where kids could come and find other kids who love games as much as they did, because a lot of kids don't have a gaming community. And so I provide this community online with OutSchool. And now I have a bunch of teachers who help me host these social clubs for kids, and it's a great time. We love it.
I think that's really amazing. When you talk about your career going from, teaching kids English, right, in China, and, the problems with the hours and things like that. Could you talk a little bit more about the flexibility now that you have with your organization?
Yeah, one of the things that is very important to me is flexibility because I do have four daughters. And so it's very important for me to still be a mom while still owning my organization. And so what I've been able to do is I've hired other gamers like myself who love to work with kids and help kids. And now they also help me teach classes. And it's been really awesome as I've added to my team. We've been able to expand our library. So, for example, I just hired a couple teachers who are very, very good at the Pokemon trading card game. And a lot of kids love Pokemon cards, but they don't even realize there's a game to play with it. And so now we have those classes where they're able to learn strategy and all those kinds of things through the Pokemon trading card game. And we have Zelda, all sorts of different games for the kids to play.
I think that's amazing too, because the idea of being able to grow an idea and it wasn't like something that was like completely forced. It sounds like it was something that was just natural, like it just naturally happened. Could you could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so what I found was happening was these students would come to my classes and they loved them. And I would get feedback from parents that surprised me. They would say things like, my child's self-confidence has increased since they started coming to your video game class. And my child is happier because they have this community of peers. And so what happened was I was limited in the games that I played, but also by my time, of course. And parents and students wanted more and more classes. And I was kind of at my capacity. I was like, I really can't teach any more classes, but I wanted to bring on others who could teach those classes so we could continue to provide these very important spaces for these kiddos. It's so important to have your interests validated as a child. And we see this in volleyball clubs or book clubs or chess clubs. There's clubs for everything, but there really aren't clubs for gaming. And so that's where we have filled that space so that these kids can find a place where they have like-minded peers and they feel accepted, but it's also safe and moderated by an adult.
Yeah, and I think that's really great because sometimes with technology, we encounter sometimes weird moments where it's like, well, should they or should they not, right? Because you're thinking, well, is that going to be good space? But the fact that your organization provides that space for kids is really great. And you earlier you talk about the idea of confidence, through gaming, and that's something that's really interesting, I think, because sometimes people think, oh, if you're wrong, then you feel like not so confident. But could you talk more about the relationship of confidence to gaming and, that idea of that interaction?
Absolutely. And I think it's something everyone, even adults, not just children, but we all know how it feels when you win, right? You know how it feels when you win a game, whatever the game is, even if it's like you're cleaning your house and you have a 10-minute timer, like if you beat the timer, you win and it feels great. And so that's kind of the base of confidence with gaming. But the other part of it is a lot of children, I speak from my own experience here, a lot of children don't necessarily feel comfortable in the amount of gaming that they love to do because society has very much painted games as the bad guy. Right? It's a waste of time, or, you're in your basement alone, or it's not worth anything. And so kids naturally kind of tend to suppress that because they're like, oh, I don't want to be the weird gaming kid, or I don't want people to think this about me because I can name 500,000 Pokemon, And so what happens is these kids, I see it every time a new student comes to my class, they're kind of shy. And they're like, oh yeah, I like Pokemon. We'll use Pokemon as an example. I like it. It's fun. And then once they see these other kids around them that are like, oh, this very obscure little detail about Pokemon that they know. And then this new kiddo's like, hey, I know that too. I'm not out of place here. These are my people. They understand. And it's just like that with any kind of community. But again, there's really not a community for gamers. And so when these kids come to class, all of a sudden they don't feel alone in the world. They're like, wow, there's other gamers like me who love to, hyper focus on this game or who really want to learn all of these details about this particular game. And it really changes. You see them change as the class goes on. They just become more confident in themselves. And then that just bleeds into their everyday lives too.
No, definitely. And I think that's a really, great thing to mention, the idea of not feeling like, the person that's like outside of, the whole community, right? And and it's one of those things that when we think about the rap that sometimes gaming has, or even like music, right? Like the band kid, like type of thing. Like,
Yes.
oh, the band kid is kind of at the, at this part of like the food chain, right? Right.
Hmm.
But the thing is, like nowadays, our society has changed so much because whether it's through gaming or whether it's through music or language learning or whether it's through, even being part of, different clubs, that confidence is so important, and it, like you said, do you find actually that your students or the students that are part of your org are how, in regards to their academic performance, have you seen any correlation with that?
That's a hard one to speak on because I'm not their academic teacher. I will say, however, that when I am teaching an academic class, like my Zelda writing class I mentioned, children are more invested when it's something they're interested in. And so I've been doing some one-on-one tutoring with a couple of students, and anytime that we have writing assignments, I let them write about games, and I understand the games, and they're more excited about it. It's no longer like you must write 3 pages. It's like, wow, you wrote 10 pages about this? That's amazing. Now that we have this passion that you have, kindled here, let's format it in the way that it needs to be formatted. But the beautiful thing about games that a lot of people don't understand is there is a lot of very passive learning, very intrinsic learning, because games have an ecosystem, they have a whole economic system, they have cooking, they have math, there's music, there's such beautiful music in gaming. And so when you allow kids to completely immerse themselves in a game, they learn so many life skills without sitting down and saying, okay, here is how you need to budget. No, they realize I need to budget if I want to buy this armor. I have to save my money. I need to sell this, and they learn these kinds of things. So while I haven't seen, personally like academic scores, I certainly know that my students are better at math than any other student I have ever met because they can balance the probability and statistics of a Pokemon's moves in a battle.
No, definitely. And I think also too, it's like the idea of problem solving together,
Mhm.
and being able to communicate together of what that looks like. And I think, a lot of time, sometimes people dismiss, different types of activities, but, if they're in a safe space where, the facilitator of, the class like is being able to say, all right, so making sure that, there's safe interactions, that, being able to provide guidance when needed, I can only imagine, how much they learn, because sometimes like with life skills, right, it does transfer over. uh, I got to contact one of your students, to do my taxes. If they're so good at math.
Seriously.
If there's
They
a
really probably could do it better than I could. I'm not even joking. I'm like, yep, I'll give you their names.
No, definitely. I think that's really great. Now, I know with a lot of the things that you're doing, with your experience, in education, how has it been, being able to have more teachers, work with you? Not only that, but also being able to, continue, to grow your organization, in regards to, continued development.
I think the coolest part of it is once, I'm just one person. I have my life experiences, I have my knowledge. But once you build that pool out, there's so much more that you can tap into. So, we're talking about music. I have a teacher who has years and years and years of musical education. She's done professional performances. She is a accomplished musician. And so she is currently teaching a class that is the history of music in video games. And so she goes from, 8-bit pixelated music all the way through to current music with like the Zelda live orchestra. That's not something I could ever teach. I play piano, but that's about it. And then like I just hired another teacher who has a lot of experience with folklore and mythology. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to build a class about Greek mythology through video games because there's so many games that touch on mythology. And so it's like, okay, now you have this base, let's dive deeper. And so that's the coolest part about it is as you add more people to the team, just the breadth of classes you can offer to children and more spaces where they feel like they can go. It's just amazing. It's amazing the amount of skills and talents that all of my teachers have.
I think that's amazing, especially with, an organization, that's, thriving. You want to have that energy and, and being able to provide that service to students. Now, I know for a fact that, sometimes, teachers or teachpreneurs, right? That's a word, right? I've seen it
I
on
like that word. Yeah.
I've seen it on the
Yeah, teacher.
internet. So, in regards to, the way that we approach education, right? Because of the fact that, it's very specialized, right? It's not even just about, making, okay, you have a class of 30 kids. You're like, okay, we're going to do X, Y, Z. But, with the class offerings that you have that are so specific that actually address a need in, society, how do you feel in regards to the continued development of, being able to further build your org?
Well, the interesting thing is, I actually don't hire teachers specifically. I hire gamers who like to work with children. And I think that's an important distinction because sometimes as teachers, we have those preconceived, notions of like, okay, it needs to be this, we need to have the goals, we need to have the grades, which is fine. That's a great learning model, but it's not the learning model that we do in my organization, right? And so what I like to do is I hire teachers who have different skill sets, different backgrounds, but I prioritize that they are gamers because, and the reason I do this is because the most important thing for me is that my students, our students in our organization, feel like they have an adult who understands them. And you can hire a teacher who could talk about Pokemon. Sure, a lot of people know a little bit here and there, but not everyone goes as deep as me and my teachers do, right? Not everyone knows all 9 generations, all the different gym leaders and all those different things. And so that's the big priority for me, is providing an adult for these children who understands them on a deep level, right? Who understands. So then when they say, look, I built this in Minecraft, the teacher can look at it and say, I can tell that probably took you 15 hours, or I can tell that you did something really special here. Whereas another teacher might be able to be like, oh yeah, that's cool. But the child doesn't feel that validation. And that's really what we go for in our classes.
And I love that, the idea of feeling seen, for kids. I mean, that is so profound, because a lot of the time, when we think about, our interactions with kids, we don't really realize that these are the moments, these moments that you talk about, being able to share the things that they create, the things that they're invested in, and then being able to do a deep dive in regards to what they did, what was good about it, maybe providing feedback about what could be improved, versus with what you mentioned, just being in a traditional space, right? There's nothing wrong with traditional, but being able to say, well, that was nice, great. I feel like, I think that's really great. And I think that's also, when we think about the idea of organizations or, specifically your organization, is that, what separates, the idea of public school or private school or, different charter schools is, to, specific needs that kids have, is the fact that, as teacherpreneurs, we don't just think about like what they get, but like the deeper levels of it. How long did it take for you to actually, like create this mindset in regards to your approach?
Well, one of the best parts about it is this is a mindset I've had my entire life with gaming, right? I've always been a gamer, right? I've gamed since I was big enough to hold a controller, right? So gaming has always been a big part of my life. And so I felt that gap, that disconnect, because my family isn't a family of gamers. I didn't have a big community of friends who gamed. Like they would play casually with me, And so as I started creating these classes, I actually noticed in myself, like also this confidence increase. I'm like, wow, what I know, the knowledge that I have, this, quote unquote, useless knowledge that I've been told my whole life is not ever going to do anything. I'm like, I am giving these kiddos my experience and my knowledge, and it's helping them feel more confident and everything like that. And so it was very interesting because when I first started doing the social clubs, I didn't really see that. I was like, oh, sure, we'll play games. It'll be good fun, whatever. I was like, I hope people come. I hope we have a fun time. But I was just amazed when the parents started messaging me and they're like, the change in my child, he feels seen. My daughter, she feels like she's not the only girl who plays anymore. Girls don't have a big place in the gaming space, even still. And so for a young girl who loves games to see a woman like myself or my fellow teachers gaming in a healthy way, in a safe way, and also being a mother or also being their own, person, it's a big impact. And so I didn't think it was going to go as far as it has gone. I definitely did not see that impact it was going to have on the kids at first, but now I see it and I'm like, this is something that really needs to be bigger and wider spread because kids need this. Games aren't going anywhere. Video games aren't going anywhere, right? And so why can't we just create these places where kids can find fellow gamers? But it took a while to to see the full vision for sure.
No, and I think this is really great, like being able to create that space and, being able to say, it's okay. And also one of the things that you mentioned, being a wife, being a mother, being a woman, these things that, the younger generation see. I mean, even though it's not like saying, hey, I'm a woman, I play games, it's like they see someone doing this and they say, oh, I can do that too. I think that's really the beautiful part about the work that you do in regards to that. Now, no, it really is, because sometimes, when we think about representation, we think about education, and we think about how are we connecting with our students, what are we demonstrating, because it's not even just about the, what they're doing, right? It's also about what they're experiencing with that, like subconsciously, right? So like being able to pick up on those things is something that's really important. Now, in regards to like, the different types of classes that you offer, could you talk a little bit more about like what a typical experience would be like, if there was a student that would, it's like clicking through like, oh, this class looks fun, I want to take with Miss Devyn.
Yeah, so I'll give you a couple examples. So most of our classes are social clubs. We don't have a whole lot of academic ones. We're building those as we go and as I, figure out what my teachers want to teach. But I'll give you kind of a peek into what a few different social clubs might look like. So a game like Mario Kart. Mario Kart can have 12 people playing online all at once, okay? It is a naturally competitive game, right? There is a winner and there is a loser, and the game lets you know which one you are, right? You get the trophy or your character walks off very sadly. And so it creates this space where kids are a little bit competitive with each other. And so they log in, we have a private room where they can game together and everything, so there aren't random strangers popping in. But then what happens is you see one child excel, and win over and over and over again because they're very, very good. And then you see other children who are trying to catch up. And so they start to set goals for themselves. They're like, okay, I'm going to work on this so that next week I can beat her in this race or whatever it is. But you're also at the same time creating this space where the child who is miles ahead of everyone in some cases, on the track, is tutoring and mentoring these kids who are still learning. They're like, hey, if you want to go faster, maybe change your wheels on your bike. That might make you go faster. Or, I noticed you were having trouble with this turn. You should try and do this. And so it really naturally creates these spaces for leadership opportunities and learning for the kids who are catching up. Same with like a game like Fortnite, for example, or a shooter game. Any shooter game where you're on a team, you really have to coordinate and you have to trust each other. You have to be like, hey, you got to have my back because I'm going out here to try and get this special item or whatever. Please don't let me die. You got to keep me safe. And you have to build that trust with each other. And again, the kids who are better at the game start to tutor the kids that need help. And so it really creates this amazing mentorship opportunity. Now, in a game like Zelda, where it's a one-person game and you can't log in together, it becomes a discussion and a very verbal communication kind of class. So in a Zelda game, you go in, they're called shrines in Tears of the Kingdom, and you walk in and it says, okay, you need to get from point A to point B, but all you have is this stick. What are you going to do? And so kids start to learn how to verbally communicate. They say, all right, Miss Devyn, I'm in this room with a stick. I'm like, well, what else is around you? What else do you see? And they're like, well, there's also a fan over here, and then there's a fire. And I'm like, okay, what do you think you should do? So it becomes that problem solving that you were talking about. They're like, well, maybe if I take the fan over here and use my stick as a propeller, maybe I can do, and they start to think through it. And so there's these logic puzzles that they kind of solve in a lot of these one-player games. It's just puzzle after puzzle of spatial awareness and problem solving, all these different things. So it really depends on the class. But when you come to our classes, it's really, what do you want to do today, kiddo? And they say, I really want to learn how to do this, or I want to battle you in Pokemon. And we just start where the kids are, and then we build the class as we go.
I think that's amazing. I actually, what was it? The shooter game. I played a couple of years ago with some friends. They were trying to teach me. It was kind of cute, but I kept screwing up because, when you say left and right, and I was like, wait,
Yes.
is it like the left of of the image, or is it like, so I kept shooting at the wrong things. And it was like funny because my friends were like, hey, look, no, you're left. You're left. I'm like, oh wait, is this no, the other one?
Which left? Which one?
Wait, you're done. No one likes you anymore. I was like, oh man. I was like, they're like, it's okay. You play the clarinet. We still love you.
Love you, right? And that's the best part is games are just for fun, and that's the biggest thing is like sometimes you can get really into a game, right? We all know that. You can get really deep in a game, but we always are very focused on like, we're just having fun, guys. It's all right if we lost the match. That's okay. What can we do differently? It's okay. So you come to a class, Kristine, and we'll teach you. We'll teach you how to play.
No, I mean, and that's the thing, I think, for example, like in regards to families, right? When they're looking for a way of, finding a place for their kids, and, taking the experiences that you've been talking about in regards to what you have to offer to your students, right? Like what is the takeaway for families? If they're like, well, I don't know what video games, but let's see what this has to offer. Like what would be like, the deal breaker that you would share with families?
Anytime I have a family who reaches out or someone who says like, why would I ever put a child in a gaming class? Gaming is not good, right? That's usually the approach that people say. Gaming is not good. And the problem with that is you are putting a lot on a game, right? It's not about the game. It's about how you approach the game. It's about your habits towards the game. Because if you are alone in a dark basement playing a game for 17 hours, of course, that is not healthy, right? We know this. It's not rocket science here. And so what happens is a lot of people put the blame on the game where we need to change the behavior. And so when parents ask about my classes, what I explain to them is I'm like, one of the benefits is that your child is socializing while they're gaming. They're not by themselves, right? And just being in that social environment is going to help their mental health, okay? Another thing is with my classes is they are timed. And so they're only, 50 to 90 minutes, depending on the game. And so children, what they'll do is they'll come and they'll game for that time. And then a lot of times they don't want to game otherwise because it's not as fun. Or parents will use my classes as a screen time kind of counter, They're like, as long as you're in a class with Miss Devyn, then you can play. But as soon as the class is over, that's your screen time for the day. And so that's a way for them to set a healthy boundary. But I think the problem with it is mostly just that as a general statement, we demonize the game. It's like saying television is bad. Movies are bad. It's like, no, the movies aren't bad. The television isn't bad. It's how do we approach the television? How do we approach the movie? Are we watching things that are age appropriate, right? Are we watching things that are good for us, like for our, mental health and all those things? And it's the exact same thing with books and it's the same thing with games, but people don't quite make that distinction. And so I love teaching parents about that. I love explaining it to them. And also telling them like, these are games you can start to play with your child too. These games are, why not take an interest in what your child is interested in?
No, definitely. And you could even say it's, listen, it's the same with Taco Bell, right?
Yes.
If you abuse Taco Bell, I mean, there are consequences, right? But
exactly.
If we eat Taco Bell with friends, it's everything in moderation, right? No, but this is really great stuff, Devyn, being able to learn more about, the value of gamification in a social setting. But not only that, we also talked about the idea of, social well-being, mental health, being able to build confidence, being able to, just put yourself out there, being seen, and these are things that are so important for our students today, because technology is just going to keep on going, right? In regards to, and so it's like, why fight it, right? We have to embrace it. And so I want to thank you for joining us today and for being a part of our community. And we continue to look forward to seeing all the wonderful things that you continue to do.
Yes. Well, thanks so much for having me. It's always great to chat with someone about this. I love it.
Thank you for tuning into Homeschool Edu Topics with Dr. Kristine Dizon, where we explore the journey of homeschooling together, sharing insights, strategies, and stories to empower your teaching and enrich your homeschool experience. If you found value in today's episode and want to be part of our growing community, here's how you can join in. Subscribe to Homeschool EduTopics on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss out on our weekly episodes full of tips, resources, and inspiring conversations. Share this podcast with friends and fellow homeschoolers who might benefit from our community, whether through social media, word of mouth, or by leaving us a review. Your support helps us reach more families and make a bigger impact. Engage with us. Visit our website at www.musicandlanguagecenter.com to access additional resources, join our newsletter, or submit your homeschooling questions and stories. We love hearing from you and often feature listener insights in our episodes. Together, we can create a more connected, informed, and vibrant homeschooling community. So hit subscribe, spread the word, and let's make the most of our homeschooling adventure together. Until next time, keep learning and keep inspiring.